More on this subject. I want to bring in Ed Morrissey now. He's a managing editor over at Hot Air and the author of Going Red, God willing. Ed, good to talk to you today, sir.
It's great to be on with you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so the left's panic, how real do you think that is?
I think it's pretty real, and I think it's reflected in this whole Donald Trump is Hitler reborn messaging that is now going from the candidate all the way down. I mean, that's the type of thing that you used to farm out to your PR people and to House members and columnists that are, friendly to your cause. You'd have them do that, and you'd be going, well, tut, 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 let us not exaggerate now. He might not be Hitler. He's more like, Mussolini, right, or something like that.
Right.
But I think that they're just in the last 48 hours, I mean, they are just overwhelmingly trying to push this message. This is supposedly going to be Kamala Harris's closing argument on the at the Ellipse on the Mall on Tuesday, a full week ahead of actual election day, which I think is very odd. And I think it really is, they're trying to rally the base. I think that they're finding that their base is unenthusiastic. Their own voters are not enthusiastic, and they're not even trying to go for the center now. They're just trying to get their own voters to show up. And I think if you're looking at some of the data from early voting, there may be some reason that they're starting to panic about whether or not their voters are going to show up.
On this talking point issue of everyone's a hit. Trump is Hitler, and he's exactly like Hitler, and his supporters are like Nazis. Here's Hillary Clinton last night on CNN.
And one other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany.
Two things jump to mind. One is what Chris Plant said this morning on our air, which is like how ahistoric this is. They weren't neo-Nazis at the time. They were just Nazis at the time back in 1939. Right. And then the other piece here is that her husband literally held his convention in 1992 at Madison Square Garden. So what was that rally, Ed Morrissey?
I don't know. I mean, both parties have had their conventions at Madison Square Garden since then. I think several times, right? I mean, if you're going to go from that point forward, I was at the Republican one in 2004. I don't know if they'd had one prior to that at Madison Square Garden.
Are you telling me that every Knicks game is actually a Nazi rally?
Well, I guess if you're a Nets fan, maybe. I don't. No, of course not. I mean, it's silly. I mean, this is the silliest argument. It's not as though he's going over to Germany to hold a rally. You know who actually did that as part of a presidential election cycle? Barack Obama. Barack Obama actually went to Germany. I don't think it was in Nuremberg. I don't want to say it was in Nuremberg, but he actually went to Germany to do a rally in Germany during the 2008 campaign. And I certainly wouldn't have called him a fascist for that.
Unbelievable.
It was a bizarre thing to do if you're running for president in America to go to Germany to hold a rally. But he was trying to, of course, impress upon people how beloved he would be as an American leader worldwide.
Ed, one of the things that I'm observing, and you've been observing this longer than I have, politics and how it works and what's effective. I don't get her campaign in terms of its strategy. So the last few weeks, she's been campaigning with Liz Cheney. She's now flailing about saying that Trump is Hitler. She's incapable of doing an interview. She tries to do softball interviews. She steps on rakes. She tries to do tougher interviews with Bret Baier. She steps on rakes. And now in this final week, she's going to do some sort of January 6th theater, and she's going to have Bruce Springsteen doing concerts for her. I don't understand how any of this is an effective political campaign.
Well, I mean, and today she's in Texas, right? She's in Houston. Now, I live in Texas. It's not a battleground state. And I don't know why she's in Houston with 10 days left to go. I don't know why she's doing a closing argument with 6 days left to go. 6 campaign days left to go before the election. I mean, none of that makes a lot of sense unless they're trying to get her out of the battleground states so they can send better surrogates in there to try to make the pitch. I mean, she said that she's in Texas because it's the tip of the spear for the abortion issue, which is not even in the top 4 issues facing voters at this point. I mean, they want to make that an issue, but that's not where voters are at. She's not talking to voters where they're at. She's lecturing voters as to where she wants to be at. And it just doesn't make any sense at all to me.
The Houston thing is interesting, and this is just I have a working theory on why they picked Houston. They announced on Monday that they'd be going to Houston on Friday. The Atlantic came out with its piece, Jeffrey Goldberg did, on Tuesday, and the centerpiece of that was the lead, which is that Vanessa Guillen, the Army soldier who was brutally murdered in Texas, her hometown is Houston. And I was kind of the impression, this is an inside job. This is like Lauren Powell Jobs, who owns the Atlantic, working with Kamala, trying to salvage the campaign. We're going to give you a great story for Houston. It turns out the whole family, Vanessa Guillen's family, they're supporting Trump and say that the story's garbage. So that whole thing's imploded. But you mentioned that maybe they're trying to keep her out of the swing states and send in better surrogates. But I don't know if they have better surrogates. Bill Clinton was in Arizona this week. And he said the following. Take a listen to this.
I mean, she was there as vice president, and what they think of her largely depends on what they think of President Biden.
Oh, boy.
But she is extremely vulnerable, more vulnerable than she deserves to be.
And then he went on to say, Carrie Lake is kind of hot. Listen to Bill Clinton.
Running against someone who is physically attractive but believes that politics is a performance art.
Oh, my gosh. What kind of surrogates are these, Ed?
I think maybe Bill Clinton thinks he's in the surrogate business of a different nature altogether. The less said about that, the better, Vince. The less said about that, the better. I think Barack Obama is what I mean. They're going to send Barack Obama to Pennsylvania, Michigan. They sent Hillary Clinton to Michigan for, I don't know what they were thinking with that. She's the one who lost to him in the first place. But I think this whole Trump is a fascist finale thing is really indicative that they're desperate and they're trying to find ways to shore up their own base, because nobody has any enthusiasm for this candidacy.
And the truth is, it's a vile attack. It's a very vile attack, and it's the kind of attack that forms the basis for mentally ill people to take them up on the gambit that he is like a Hitler figure. And we saw, the second Trump assassin, the would-be assassin, was crystal clear that he said democracy is on the ballot. He said on social media, he was a big Biden-Harris supporter. He was hiding in the bushes, attempting to kill Trump because he thought it would save the country. They're breathing life into that kind of mental illness when they say things like this. That's one. And the other piece is, are you actually going to move votes with this garbage? Because they've been riding the January 6th insurrection thing for going on 3.5 years, and Trump has never been more popular than he is now, Ed Morrissey.
Yeah, I mean, do we think that hasn't been litigated? I mean, like literally litigated?
Yes.
Over and over and over again for the last 3 years. I think that this is one of those. I've been trying to find a good analogy for this, Vince, and this is the one that I think that I'm going to keep landing on. When people are talking to, when people are speaking to other people who don't share the same language, and this is probably true mostly of American English speakers, is that you're talking to somebody, you realize that they don't speak English, and then because you really want to make sure that they understand you, you just start yelling.
Yeah.
I said, "How do you do?" Because that works. I think that's the analogy that I have to land on with this, is that they've been using this messaging, and it's not just the last 3 months. They've been doing this for 2 years. Ever since they found out that Trump was going to run for another term of office, they've been running this disqualification strategy against them, and it's not working. It's not even really advancing the ball at all anymore. And to a certain extent, I think it's backfiring. And rather than recognize that, they think that the solution is just to say it louder and more often. And it's really bad now.
Yes, but it'd be one thing if they had some sort of facts to support them and they were like, man, our message really isn't getting through. Perhaps we should shout it louder. Instead, what we're getting is Mika Brzezinski goes on her morning show and says that Donald Trump is going to use the military to kill American citizens, that women are dying, we're all going to be thrown in camps. The View is claiming that Donald Trump is going to bomb their studio. And like, we're hearing the most ludicrous possible hysterics coming out of the left right now. And I guess the upshot is that there's plenty of Americans who are laughing at that, saying that's ridiculous, but they're not making a real case, Ed.
No, they're shrieking. They're shrieking it, and they're shrieking over and over again. They're not making a real case, and they're just saying if you support them, then you're a fascist too. I mean, this is nonsense stuff. This is sheer demagoguery. It doesn't have any connection to reality. This is a guy who was actually president for 4 years.
Yeah.
Right. And people understand what it's going to be like to put him in office again for another 4 years. There'll be a bunch of stupid tweets and policies that they like. And, and apparently they didn't like the stupid tweets in 2020, but maybe 2024, they're thinking, I'll take the stupid tweets I'll take the stupid tweets for 200, Alex. I mean, it's disconnected from reality, and the more that they keep pursuing this, the more that they look disconnected from reality.
Right.
The more that they look like the problem.
Yeah, people want their lives back, and they liked their lives better when Trump was president. Lastly, on the data front, because I know you follow this, Ed, what are you looking for? What's the thing what are the indicators that you're looking at that as we go into Election Day? A lot is being said about the early vote. It does seem like it's going well for Republicans. The polls, and the New York Times coming out with this survey today saying that in the popular vote, it's a dead heat, 48-48, which usually redounds to the benefit of the Republican with the Electoral College. What are you staring at?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the polls, obviously, and the early vote. I mean, there's some really good indications from the early vote. Nevada is looking surprisingly good for Republicans in the early vote. And I'm looking at John Ralston, who is absolutely the best at analysis for Nevada elections. And so whatever John Ralston is taking away from that, I pretty much trust his takeaway. But I'm looking at the polls too, and I'm looking at the battleground polls more than the national polls. But the national polls are interesting. You had not just one, but two major polls that came out today that are not normally friendly to Republicans that show the national vote at a dead heat tie. New York Times Siena, it was the first one. That was this morning. But CNN dropped a poll later in the day showing that it's a tie at 47-47. And needless to say, if you're tying in the national vote, because of the structure of the Electoral College, that is very bad news for Democrats. If the final iteration of all these polls is that Trump has gotten into a tie with Kamala Harris from, I don't remember what the last CNN poll showed. I guess I can try to look it up here while we're talking. It was Harris +1 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That's momentum. So voters are moving in Trump's direction in national polling. Usually these media polls use sample structures that overload on Democrats anyway. But even if it's a tie nationally, that means that all that support that comes on the coasts is on one side, and the stuff in the middle of the country is another. And that is a recipe for an electoral college loss for Democrats. They cannot win an election if there really is a straight up tie in the national polling. They just can't do it.
All right. Well, we'll keep tracking it. 11 days to go. I can't even believe we're this close. Ed Morrissey from Hot Air. A great website, great guy. Thank you, Ed. Good to talk to you today.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me on today.